Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We still have several folks logging in, so we'll give them another moment. But thanks for joining us and thanks for being on time. Okay, good morning again, folks. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. This is going to be the fourth in this series of 2021 WaterFirst Webinars. My name is Stacey Isaac Barraza. I'm with a consulting firm called IB Environmental, and some of us on our team will be helping to facilitate and run the webinar today on behalf of GFA, but we do have some GFA staff as well in the background that would help answer questions, etc., as needed. So again, welcome. We will run through here a little bit of information on the WaterFirst program in general, and then we'll hear from our panelists who actually help review applications when they come into the WaterFirst program. So that's quite a treat that you all are in for today. But before we dive into the content, let's look at some of the logistics on sort of how to use the webinar platform. So you will see a control panel on the next slide. Here we go. You have a control panel on your screen. That little top icon, which is a red rectangle with a white arrow, will help you toggle that control panel in terms of minimizing it or maximizing it so you can see all the features. You all are all muted today, but there is, I think, one thing that we'll point out on that control panel is the raise hand feature. So we will encourage you to use that along the webinar if something comes up. So for instance, we'll ask people now, if you are having any technical difficulties, raise your hand. So if you're not, then you don't need to raise your hand, right? So let's just see if anybody has raised their hands. We'll try to reach out to you and see if we can address the issues that you're having. Besides that, I think we will, at this point, I think a lot of folks are very familiar with all of these different platforms. The next thing that we are going to look at is a poll question. And so Alana is going to read that and we'll ask you to participate, please, by responding.
All right, everyone, so you should see a poll question up on your screen. And the question is, have you attended the previous WaterFirst webinars in this series? So your options are yes, all of them, kinda, some of them, which would be 1 to 2 sessions, no, this is my first one, or no, but I plan to watch them on YouTube. So these are your options that you can select from. You would just click the radio button and submit your answers. Right, and I see people are responding. Thank you so much. We will keep the poll open for another couple seconds so everyone can submit their responses. And we will close it in 3, 2, 1. All right, Stacy, so it looks like 77% have seen at least 1 to 2 sessions, 15% yes, all of them, thank you guys, and then 8% no, this is my first one.
Okay, great. Well, we are going to drop in the chat in case you change your mind and you haven't seen all of them and you want to watch the recordings on YouTube. We'll drop in the chat at some point during the webinar today, the link for how you can access those. And that will also be available at the end. And maybe I should have shared a little bit more about the control panel. There are a couple handouts in there. One is the bios for the panelists today, and then the other one should be a copy of these slides that we're going through. So it's a good idea to download that during the webinar. And then in terms of your participation, etc., we may do something like this. GFA may offer some more WaterFirst trainings next year, and so we'd appreciate your feedback at the end. An evaluation survey link will pop up at the end of the webinar, so please take just a moment to fill that out and give us some feedback, which we'll look at to sort of design and tweak any upcoming events. All right, so with that, let's move to the next slide. What is the WaterFirst program? And so it's a partnership really between the state, GFA, and a couple of its partners with the local utility, right? And so the whole thing is to better manage water resources. And so it's about really going above and beyond the state's minimum environmental requirements. So if you think about this webinar series back in April, we had sort of a kickoff and we had some of the most recent WaterFirst designees attend and talk about their experience. What was the most challenging part, etc., for them in, like I said, in the last year or two. Most of those designees were really very recent recipients of that designation. Then we moved on in the series to talk about, we had some folks from the Georgia Waterwise Council come and talk about going above and beyond what the state requires, and gave some really good examples. The speaker was from Athens-Clarke County, and so she really shared a lot of detail on some of the programs and events, etc., that they've had in her community. So check that out if you haven't had a chance to. And then we had Christine Booty from EPD talk about the very minimum requirements for the state. So we wanted to show sort of the delta there, what the basic stuff is that you need to get done in terms of water management and especially water conservation. And then on the water conservation side, again, how you can go above and beyond that. And I should say the state EPD review covered all aspects of water. And you'll see on one of these slides here in a moment that the WaterFirst program is very comprehensive. There are a lot of components to it. So that's in a nutshell what the program is about. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit more about the application process and what's involved there. It doesn't take 5 minutes to fill this out, but this is a checklist that GFA provides to kind of help you work through the process. In some cases, we've seen sort of a special project staff person will sort of lead the utility or the community through the process. In other cases, it's just part of somebody else's duties. So there are different ways, there are different models for addressing it. But it is an extensive program. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes, but there are tools like this checklist to help you work through the steps. And GFA is also very accessible. That's one of the, I think, most salient pieces of feedback we've gotten. So earlier in the year too, around in the spring, one of the things that IB Environmental did was help GFA with a survey of the 40+ WaterFirst designees in the state. And resoundingly, one of the pieces of feedback was that the GFA staff was so hands-on and so very helpful with the questions and any challenges that the community had. So at the end of this webinar, we'll provide you contact information for the department at GFA that you could reach out to help you get started or even finish up the last, finishing touches on your application. All right, on the next slide, one of the important pieces of the application process is this on-site review. And our panelists today have been involved with those, and they can give you a good feel for what an on-site review looks like. From my limited experience, it seems like it's quite tailored by the utility, where you get to show off a piece of your process or part of your facilities that's most relevant here. And I know I get the impression too that the staff at GFA and the reviewers, the application reviewers, really enjoy that piece of it as well. So the next slide looks at all the components. Again, we don't want to give you any sort of false impressions. This is not a simple, quick process. So in some ways it might be simple because a lot of stuff is laid out, but it is intensive, it takes some time, and it's pretty comprehensive. So this slide just gives you an idea of some of the components, everything from a watershed assessment to educational outreach to your water users and your community. Reclamation, water reclamation and reuse is in there too. That's probably something that we haven't seen a whole lot of big action on recently in Georgia, and so it's something that, you know, maybe it's one area that will provide more resources to utilities who are interested in doing more in that particular area. But just really comprehensive. Of course, water conservation is kind of that top middle one. That's a really big part of it. So the next slide gives you an idea of the benefits of going through this process. It's kind of like getting your ducks in a row. It's a framework, in my opinion, to kind of do the best at managing your important water resources, right? So you go through this process and it gives you opportunities to improve on your water management, whether it be drinking water, wastewater, or stormwater. So that's a benefit in itself, being able to run your systems better, your utilities better, and just being a better steward of your water resources. But beyond that, the state also offers through GFA a 1% interest rate reduction. So GFA has relatively low interest rates to start with, but that 1% interest rate reduction is pretty significant. And it, you know, while completing the WaterFirst program does take some time, staff time, and resources, that 1% interest rate probably can offset some of that investment, you know, that your community puts into seeking this designation. There's also eligibility to DCA's Community Development or CDBG block grant program, and 319 at the state of Georgia's Environmental Protection Department also looks at some of their benefits to having the WaterFirst designation in terms of being prioritized for EPD grant funding. So other benefits as well. On the next slide, you'll see that there's a sign. So this is one of the big things when your community does receive the designation, when you finish the process, is that there will be these community signs that you can put up to show off that you have been through this process and sort of and it has received, and that your community, sorry, has received this designation. So this is probably going to happen at a city council meeting or a board meeting for your utility, one of those kinds of events, and GFA staff will come and present this designation to your community. On the next slide, I think we're really just moving in now to our panel discussion. I'll just check really quickly to see if there were any questions on sort of this overview of the WaterFirst program. Don't see any right now, but it's a good time and a reminder for you to not only download the handouts, but also drop your questions into that questions box so that we can kind of address your specific needs and concerns today. All right, so while y'all are taking some time to do that, I'll introduce our three panelists today. So first, I'll introduce Kathleen Bowen. She is an Associate Legislative Director for the Association County Commissioners of Georgia, or ACCG. She's with over 15 years of experience at ACCG. She currently serves as a member of the ACCG policy team, and on behalf of Georgia's county governments, she's responsible for public policy in the areas of transportation, economic development, natural resource, and the environment, as well as federal policy issues. So I think of Kathleen as working only on environmental issues, but apparently she does a whole lot more. So we welcome Kathleen today, and then I'll mention also our next panelist is Lee Askew-Elkins. She has been part of the University of Georgia's Public Service and Outreach for 16 years and with the Carl Vinson Institute of Government since 2012. Lee helps communities creatively integrate natural resource planning with community and economic development opportunities, often referred to as asset-based community development. She has extensive experience in designing and implementing public engagement processes, and she regularly works with communities on planning and visioning projects, and with state agencies on stakeholder-driven endeavors. Before coming to UGA, she worked for the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, where she led the creation and implementation of the WaterFirst Community Program. So Lee has a very unique perspective on the WaterFirst program because she was there in the beginning, starting it up. So, okay, and then our next speaker, or panelist, I should say, is Michael McPherson. Michael is a municipal services consultant in his 9th year with the Georgia Municipal Association. He's assigned to the cities in the metropolitan Atlanta area, and he acts as a liaison with their associated support organizations. Until recently, Michael served GMA in the Governmental Relations Department, where his policy responsibilities ranged from revenue and finance to environment and natural resources and community development. For the past several years, Michael has reviewed applications for the WaterFirst program. He and his wife Ying have a 5-year-old daughter, Katie Lou, and a 3-year-old son, Win-Win, and live in Sandy Springs. So those are your panelists this morning, and we'll ask them to go ahead and turn their cameras on so you can see and put faces with names. All right, panelists, we can see all of you. Great, and I will go ahead here and start with some of the questions, right? So I'll kick off with a few, and then, well, with a couple, and then we'll take the ones from the participants as well. So again, the questions box, folks, go ahead and put your questions in there, and we will we'll address them to the panelists. Okay, so we will start. Let's see. The order on my screen is Kathleen Lee and then Michael. So maybe we'll start with that order. And apologies if we discussed something else before. I feel like I had a plan on this, but I might be changing it now. So anyway, so we'll start with you, Kathleen, all right? Can you tell us about your role with WaterFirst and how long you've been involved with the program?
Good morning, everybody. So I have been reviewing WaterFirst applications for 6 years or so, but I have been at ACCG for over 15 years. So I do feel like I know our county governments very well, but only been reviewing these applications for about 6 years.
Okay, great. How about you, Lee?
So I actually became involved with creating the program in 2001. It really officially launched in 2003 with the first designations, but it was kind of born out of some of the work that was being done by Jim Kundle in the Georgia legislature. He was the science advisor, and he was actually at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government then. And he wrote a paper called Whose Water Is It? Major Water Allocation Issues in Georgia. And from that came out another paper in 2000 that was the Comprehensive Statewide Water Management Plan Framework for managing Georgia's water resources. And with these documents, we thought, well, there are a lot of communities that are already doing really good stuff, that are really going, really managing water resources well. And we've been in this tri-state water wars for almost 10 years now, and nobody's talking about the good things that happen. So that's kind of where WaterFirst came from and where my involvement with it began.
Excellent. Michael?
I think my involvement began in late 2017. So I've been involved for about 4 years, and yeah, I took over the environmental policy area during my stint in government relations about a year or two before my involvement started. So got my feet wet a little bit, and then I think folks at GIFA reached out and said, hey, help us out.
Okay, great. All right, so we have a wide array in terms of how long people have been involved with WaterFirst, which I think is great. So the next question, and maybe this time we'll go to Lee, Michael, and Kathleen. I don't want the same person to be first or last every time, right? So Lee, Michael, Kathleen. The question is, what are some of the key things that you look for when reviewing an application? So basically some tips on putting together a successful WaterFirst program application.
So I think for me, I like to see the involvement of the people who actually do the work every day. It's great to have the leadership talk about their departments and everything, but I like to hear from the folks who it's their work every day. I also look, just because of my background and the work I do now, how the community is being engaged, what kind of educational programs there are that kind of go above and beyond, and how that outreach is being done. Those are kind of my pet areas, I think.
Did we decide Michael was next and then Kathleen, I think?
Okay. Yeah, so that's I guess the checklists that are provided allow us to side by side with the answers that we have to score on. And so it's very well done, I think, on the GIFA side, and it allows for, you know, detail that should be included in all the applications. Clarity is really necessary when you're getting into some of these programs that include other partners, and then exhibits that that can be included are helpful too, because it involves less homework for me, at least, when I'm trying to, you know, make sure that all of these things have happened. So so yeah, it's the checklist and the side-by-side comparisons, I think, make it very easy and very clear for us in scoring. So
Okay.
I think.
So we are the first ones that review the application after GIFA does their internal review. So I feel like, okay, so we're kind of the first people to get a chance to go through this in detail. And I feel like we probably get all the applications, I think, because I make sure every question is answered. It really, I read through the application, and then we have the checklist as well. And I really don't like it when somebody leaves it blank or they put NA, because then you're going to get 0 points when we're going through the score sheet. So I really pay attention to that. So I read through the application and I read through the checklist, and then I go back through and look at the scoring sheet to see where those answers can be found. And if you don't give us the information, then we don't have anything to score it on. Also, I really pay attention to the question on the application that says something about why do you want to participate in the WaterFirst program? I think that that's really telling. And if you give a good answer to that, it makes me have an overall positive reaction to the application.
That's interesting. So Lee is, to summarize, looking for community involvement as well as the folks hands-on at the utility, for instance, that are doing the work, not the people who sit in their office and just write up a nice looking plan. I'm paraphrasing. And Michael's looking for clear information, that checklist, side-by-side comparison, make it really easy. And Kathleen, I think what you're saying there too is really interesting. So one of the other things that GIFA has done in terms of outreach, apart from these WaterFirst webinars this year, has been, and last year and previous years as well, and probably into the future, has been what they call GIFA 101s. And so they have a topic, and it's just trying to cover some of the basics about the programs that GIFA offers, the different loan components. WaterFirst will be one of the things that they'll talk about, but the whole thing is not focused on WaterFirst, right? So just I want to make sure I distinguish between the WaterFirst webinar series and these GIFA 101s. One of the 101s involved the underwriting team. So they're not the folks who normally are talking to community, members or potential borrowers, but again, a plug for filling out the survey at the end, right? When we saw the results of these surveys or evaluations, people were saying, we want to see inside the black box. We want to know how y'all make a decision as to whether we're going to get funded or not. So here comes the GIFA underwriting team, doing a webinar, which is, like I said, not usually their role. But it was interesting. And they said, I remember very clearly, they said the same thing. Do not leave it blank. Do not put NA. I cannot help you. I can't, they probably can't even finish all their calculations if you don't, fill in everything. And they were very open to folks calling and saying, I'm not too sure what to put here, versus filling it out, submitting their loan application, and then all of these blanks, and we have to kind of, we thought we had a completed application, but we don't. We have to call you and find out. And so they advise, and they strongly encourage people to call at first and definitely not leave things blank. So I think that's a general life lesson, to not leave things blank. So it's interesting to hear you, Kathleen, reiterate that in a completely different setting, right? So this is the WaterFirst application, which is not an application directly for funding from GFA. Okay, we had a question, I think specifically for Lee here, about that, whose water is it? Is that paper available? Can we find that anymore?
It should be. It came out in 1998. So, but I have a feeling if you Google it, if you Google Jim Kundal, if you Google that, whose water is it? I know it's out there, and if you can't find it, I know I mean I probably like have the typed version of it in my office somewhere, or I know it would be in UGA's libraries, but I think it's out there. If you have trouble, you know, shoot me an email and I'll find it for you. But it should be.
Okay, great. So what we could do is, if we find it, sort of as the team here, we'll put it into the follow-up email that come out after this. And if not, Lee will be bothering you for a link, or, you know, yeah, that's a good question. I think it would give good perspective just based on who Jim Kundal was in Georgia, and how you know, kind of framed up the importance of that document. Okay, so another question here is so let's think about the order first then. Lee has gone first. Michael, I think it's your turn to go first. We'll go Michael, Lee, Kathleen, okay?
Okay.
All right, so the question is, what is the area that you see most applicants struggle to address?
Well, I think it's possibly either the educational outreach area or the conservation side, because a lot of the other programs are so standard that if you've got, I mean, if you've done it, then you know exactly what you have to put down on the page. But some of these other, I guess, community and regional aspects where you've got programs where you've partnered with others, it may be hard to describe, especially, and going back to what Lee said, if you weren't the person involved. And so again, I think that clarity can be had if someone reviews the application prior to submission. And you know, deadlines are hard, and you got to get it in, but it pays off in the end, because you know, Kathleen and I aren't going to be calling each other saying, I don't know exactly what this means, and then, you know, we'll end up having to call some other folks. But that's what I think. I think those two areas are probably the ones that are a little bit more difficult to put into words sometimes.
How about you, Lee?
Yeah, I'd agree with Michael on that, and I think that's probably lends itself to one of the reasons that just one person should not try and fill out the application. That really, if you have that kind of team approach and bring in those experts that are doing the work, you'll have a more complete application, and you may not create so many questions for reviewers because you have, you know, you've gone to the source. So if it's the person who does outreach, that they're responding to that, it's much better than if you're just trying to think, oh gosh, did they have a booth at this thing or no? So I think that helps eliminate some of those struggles. But I think those areas that Michael identified are right on.
Okay, Kathleen?
So even if you don't have jurisdiction over certain aspects, I still think you could indicate what your community is doing in these categories. I'm sure you're probably supporting those efforts. Again, just don't leave it blank. I was looking at a previous application, and it seems like the septic tank area might be one where maybe you don't have jurisdiction over that, but something's being done on septic tanks in your community. So even if you indicate you're not the one doing that, but you know that this certain thing is going on. And then also, Mike and I will talk about this. We know these water authorities, like we know them, and we think some of these applications could be stronger have they incorporated elements of what the entire county is doing or what the city's doing and not just the water authority. So we think that these applications should reflect the county or the community as a whole and not just the water authority's efforts.
Okay, great. So to follow up here though, so conservation and outreach kind of stood out as two sort of technical areas that y'all felt, oh, and septic tanks, I guess, would be a third one that applicants probably could spend a little extra time and attention on. If you could think of any resources on any of those areas, so conservation, outreach, and septic tanks, that would be, and that you want to share with the group, that would be good. And I'll mention a couple to give you all some time too. Septic tanks are tough. We get just about, at IB Environmental, just about once a month or once every couple of months, a resident, like a homeowner, calling us to find out how they can repair their septic tank. And so unfortunately, there are no real good answers to that. We do have, actually, we've developed a one-pager kind of everything we could find that may possibly relate to that homeowner, right? So maybe we'll drop a link to that in the chat. And that comes out of a group called the Georgia Funders Forum, that it's comprised of all the entities and programs in Georgia that have public funds for water, sewer, stormwater. And so a lot of these, 319 that we mentioned today, Georgia's SRF program, USDA's rural development, Department of Community Affairs has a couple different programs in there too. They get those questions as well, and very limited response right now. So we tried to do everybody a favor and put together a one-pager on that. So we'll drop that in there. In terms of funding individual homeowner septic tanks, but septic tanks are tough, and I know that they're related to the local or the county Department of Health, and so that's a partner there. But I'll see if the panelists have any more to add about septic tanks in particular before we look at some of the other challenging areas. So y'all jump in if you have any good resources more related to WaterFirst than what I shared, that has to do with septic tanks.
Again, it was more just not leaving it blank. Even if you don't have that jurisdiction, put something there because somebody in your area is doing something on that topic. And you're probably supporting it, or you're probably doing some kind of educational efforts in connection with that. And a lot of people put, for the educational efforts, their local Keep Georgia Beauty affiliate would be doing it, but they didn't specify sometimes what they were doing exactly. They just put Keep blank county does this. So some more details would make your application stronger.
Got it. Michael, Lee, anything to add on septic tanks?
I think part of it is how many, knowing and figuring out how many septic tanks that you even have, how many folks that are in your jurisdiction are on septic. And even just knowing that, then, you can start to, you may be able to identify where there may be problems in your community based on where those septic tanks are located. So, or, so I think just making sure you know who's on septic. Do you have a plan to get them off septic? That's another piece. Are you looking to run a line to get those folks off of septic? So that's kind of planning for your future. So knowing that stuff is important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and not easy.
There's a level of communication that needs to happen prior to getting into the application process when you're trying to fill out the application, and just like Kathleen and Lee said, the information's out there. There are things happening, and as the application reflects the efforts in the community, you need to take credit for it. And then moving forward, you can help boost those efforts in a number of different ways, through different media and marketing, things like that. But being creative and making sure you cast a wide net to get the most information possible, it's gonna play into a strong, robust application.
Okay. Great. And sometimes it's that communication, right? Oh, we're not very good as at the community level of tooting our own horn. Like, you know, you have this program, you have that program, and you're like, yeah, I know, we've been doing that for years, but bring it into your application and tell your story. And I think a useful way to do that and to have maybe outside folks point out what y'all are doing that's significant to this application process is talking to people who don't belong to your community. So one of the things that GIFA has been exploring is a mentor program with WaterFirst. So there are some of that 40 or so designees who are willing to talk with you. And I think having that external, you know, opinion, you might mention something and gloss over it, and somebody from another community be like, wait, that's really good, and that's very applicable to this section of the application, and you want to tell that story. But I'm also hearing all the panelists say sometimes you don't have all the details, so mention it at least, right? But then maybe find the person who's running the blank beautiful campaign and get them to write some text for you that can fit into the application. And I think that could just only lead to good things. You know, maybe you can help them with some of the things that they are doing, et cetera, or at least promote some of the events. All right, so good stuff. In terms of outreach, sort of related to that, you all mentioned outreach is also a challenging area. Any tips or resources specific to outreach? And while y'all think about that, I will say that the water conservation person, so that's the other tricky area y'all thought of, conservation, from Athens Clarke County, who also runs she's the head of the Georgia Waterwise Council currently. She gave everything, like she gave, you know, the whole playbook in terms of the types of events that they use. So I remember specifically it's a water conservation event and you see sprinklers. She has pictures of what they do at the event, probably before the pandemic. And then the sort of pull and tug with, well, if we have sprinklers, we are actually not conserving water. We're sort of wasting water, you know. But other folks that they brought in, other stakeholders, and they're like, if it's a water event, you need to have something fun for that. You have to have water there at the event, right? So they have been through some of these challenging discussions and come to compromises and figured out a lot of the stuff which she's willing to share with you. And then even like EPA's Water Sense program, etc. And other utilities or communities, they are very happy to send you like the Word documents of their flyer, and you just have to put in your community's name. So if you see something, I would say to communities, if you see a poster or a billboard or whatever out there that you like, or you heard about a water festival, contact that community, and most times they are more than proud and happy to share with you how they did it. So you don't have to reinvent things from scratch. And I think that relates to both conservation and outreach. But what do you all have to add, panelists?
I would just add real quick that we're big fans of R&D, which is rip off and duplicate. And we found that most communities will share their resources with you. So if you know a neighbor community that's an expert in something or has done really well or had some success, call them and ask. I know that I've had the city of Valdosta has a great stormwater program, and they I've had them present when I've done training for GMA, and they've said, you know, take our brochure, take our information, learn our lessons. People want to share. They want to give you what they've learned so that you can maybe learn it quicker and more easily. Or we created this program that's an educational program. Put your logo in it, and you know, and it's yours. So it doesn't hurt to ask. Somebody may say, "No, we paid, you know, $10,000 to have that made. We're not going to share it." Well, you know, it doesn't mean you can't do something similar. So really learn from your neighbors, look around the state, look at other states, see what other folks are doing, and build off that.
Great. Anyone else? Well, it's interesting, Lee, that example that you use about Valdosta. So the stormwater person who did, I think, a lot of the kickoff and initiation and did a lot of good things to get that stormwater utility to, you know, the level, the high profile that it is now. She actually works with GMA now, is that right? So let's not undercount some of these organizations here that are represented, because they have staff who've actually run some of these programs, relevant programs. So yeah, a plug to reach out to ACCG GMA and folks at like the Carl Vinson Institute over at UGA to help you. You know, hey Lee, do you have anything? Has UGA been working on anything related to X? Because we feel like that's an area that we need to beef up. You know, we're not doing much in our community on reuse, for instance, right? So yeah, just don't overlook that potential resource there. All right, so I think we kind of handled conservation and outreach together. But was there anything y'all wanted to add specifically on conservation by chance?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, I think something that you know should be said is you know, with all of the heightened environmental consciousness that's out there, you know, I think you mentioned earlier, you know, the benefits of the program beyond the financial benefits. It's the designation itself and the selling point of having that designation on literature. A lot of communities that can get this far into you know, excellence in water management have hotel motel tax dollars that a lot of that money has to be spent on marketing for your community and tourism. That's a key aspect that you can harness those funds to throw it out there that you have done the work and you go above and beyond and you receive state recognition for your conservation efforts in water, and people recognize that, and I think it should be stressed. If you're a WaterFirst community and you don't, you're missing out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know, we mentioned the 1% interest rate reduction on G4 loans specifically, and then there are some more formal connections with EPD and DCA programs in the state of Georgia. But also, this must look good on other applications that you do, even if there isn't a specific 1% discount, or you know, you will get access to this if you have WaterFirst designation. Maybe it doesn't have to be that tangible, but it still paints a good picture of your community on other things that you might be trying to get into, other programs or even other awards, etc. So yeah, I think I kind of gathered that from what you were saying, Michael. So one of the questions that we had come in is, we've touched on this before, but I'll go ahead and ask it. What do you believe communities, you know, why do you believe communities should put extra effort to apply for WaterFirst?
I think most of our communities are doing a lot of this work already. So for just a little more effort, I feel like you're going to get recognized. And I think that road signage coming into your community gets noticed. I know I notice it. I think it's, I think your citizens kind of expect you to be doing most of this stuff anyway. So for a little extra effort, go ahead and get that designation.
Okay.
I think it's also just a real kudos to your workforce that's actually doing the work every day. And just, you know, there's so little that's, well, that's not the right way to say it, but just to be able to recognize in a way that you've got these employees that are committed to making your community the best it can be when it comes to your water resources. And they take a lot of pride in their work and they work hard. And, you know, to me, that this is their designation in a lot of ways. And so from the, you know, coming from the state, I think it can mean a lot just to your workforce.
That's a good point. In a related project that I did a long time ago, not quite 1998, Lee, when that paper came out, or 1996, whatever, 1998, right? Not that long ago, but maybe around 2006. You know, one of the issues that, like the financial management, technical issues that drinking water utilities face, and wastewater utilities too, is that once they get the small, tend to be rural ones, once they get an operator trained and certified, that operator tends to leave and go to the next biggest city. And so we try to find out what makes the ones stay that do stay, right? So we had this survey that asked, why did you leave your last job? Not why are you thinking of leaving this current one, not to plant any seeds that you should leave, right? But why did you leave your last job? and we just looked for what keeps these operators happy. And the obvious answer, again, maybe to my biased mind, would be higher salary. You pay them more, they'll stay forever, right? But beyond that, they said, these were actual water operator responses. To get an attaboy from their bosses was really very useful. If they were operator of the month, having a parking spot, a special parking spot for operator of the month, I was like, wow, these things really matter. Their responses were like a pat on the back, right? So this recognition of, sometimes what feels like drudgery every day that we're doing, it was really impressive to me that went a long way to these operators staying, as opposed to causing this large turnover that the industry deals with. So yeah, now one that's not as relevant anymore, but again, this was like 2006, having a cell phone. So the cell phone was provided by the water utility, because you have to be on call and we want to be able to call you at 2 o'clock in the morning. But to them, that was a plus. So anyway, that's not as relevant anymore, but it was interesting. They said things like being able to go to a conference and stay at a hotel and have the utility cover that. So it's not always about the money directly, right? And that recognition and reward is really a lot of good positive reinforcement that can just raise the morale, I think, of your whole community and utility. So that's a great point. So another question we have here, folks, is, can you touch on a collaborative effort between city and county to become WaterFirst? Do you all see that side of it?
There are examples. I should have had the list of everybody that's been designated. Was it Barrow County and Winder? There are joint applications made, and the whole county and a city have gotten that designation together. I'll look through the list and see if I can find that example.
Let me throw out a name.
And a lot of times it may spur from.
Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
It may spur from where the water provision started in that county. A lot of times the city had the means and the wherewithal to start providing water first, and they expanded beyond their bounds. And then at other times the county took over the water systems in place and created a bigger system that helps out everybody. And so, yeah, I mean, anytime you've got overlap like that, I think both governments should be the ones to apply, or at least they should get credit jointly, just based on maybe the service area alone.
I'm looking at, I think was it City of Covington and Newton County? Like, they're listed separately, but I'm pretty sure some of these applications where you see the city and the county listed separately, I'm pretty sure their applications came in together and they worked together for that designation.
Yeah, Newton County was mentioned by staff from GFA. So yes, I was just kind of sending a note to the panelists and the organizers here about that one. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Kathleen. But we've heard a lot of good things about that collaboration, right? And even if it's not maybe as formal as this question is referring to, I'm hearing y'all talk about collaboration consistently throughout this webinar, right? Whether you're collaborating with the county, Keep Whatever Beautiful, or the wastewater folks talking to the water folks, talking to the stormwater folks, or managers talking to operators, right? There has to be some communication and some collaboration to put together a good, comprehensive application. Okay, great. Let me just check. On the collaboration question specific to Newton, if anybody else wants to come off mute and add anything there, that would be welcome, but I think we kind of addressed it a little bit. So here's a question that has come in too. This one's a little bit long. How do you overcome the negative view from citizens of your city's water quality? So especially when you are in compliance and working hard to provide the best quality water. We have lots of brown water complaints, but it is Hold on, let me get the rest of it. But it's common in the area as well. So this is a sort of aesthetic issue, pretty specific.
I mean, you have to take steps to control the backflow or whatever's causing the groundwater issue, and use that as an example. You know, you can't make something up to start some media campaign to gain trust. You've got to show people, not tell them. And you know, the steps that you take are going to be the examples that you use to gain the trust, in my opinion. And if it's insurmountable, if it's just a regional thing, perhaps, you know, everybody can kind of gain a common understanding of problems in your area that are insurmountable. But, you know, I think there has to be effort shown to combat issues that portray water systems as negative, or else you're not going to get there. There will be no trust.
I think the other part of that is don't try and hide it. I mean, put it out there and say, here's the problem. Here's what we're doing to try and address it. Here's other folks who've had this problem and how they've tried to solve it. And so I would just be real honest and upfront about it, instead of saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Water's fine here. I mean, just really, you know, really own up to it and talk about what you're doing to try and address it, and reach out to others to see what they've done to address similar problems.
Okay, and the consumer confidence reports come out, they're supposed to be coming out every year by the utility. Maybe that's one way that you can put some information out about that, following up on some of the suggestions from the panelists, right? So whether you say, what causes brown water, and say in this region of Georgia, and not necessarily call out other neighboring utilities, because next thing we have them getting a lot of calls about the water that people didn't think to call about before. But just, yeah, like Lee was saying, own it and put some information out there on it, and that could be that CCR community confidence report could be one vehicle for reaching folks. All right, so we have another question here. If a community is not strong in each area, say stormwater master planning, should they still consider WaterFirst, or work instead to be strong in each area before applying? That's an excellent question, and I'm going to give you all a moment to think about that a little bit. This question is coming from one of the regional commissions, who are another great resource, and they've probably stood alongside some communities who have applied for WaterFirst, so a plug for them as well, besides the organizations represented by our panelists today. But yeah, should you wait until you're strong in every area, or just go ahead and apply?
I mean, you can be not as strong in every single area and still get the designation. I was looking through the score sheet, and if you're strong overall and have a couple of areas where you would like to improve, I'd say still apply. And you're going to get feedback from going through the application process, as well as where your deficiencies may be, but they really might not be that bad compared to others around the state. So I wouldn't sell yourself too short.
And what's worst case scenario? You apply, you were strong on, the example here says stormwater master planning, you were weak on that area and you don't get the designation. What do you have to lose? What happens next?
I mean, Michael, it's pretty rare that people applying aren't worthy. It's just there could be some areas they could improve upon, and we make those notes. And then I think some of that stuff comes out more on the site visit phase of it, or maybe you didn't write it down as well, but once you're in the community, you're actually able to point out things that you are doing, and other things would come up that maybe you hadn't documented as well.
Yeah, I mean, exploring the application itself is going to be a step in the right direction to begin with. So if you're a community that's never applied before, look at it. look at the application process and see what boxes you check off. And then if you need to gain understanding of what some of these other programs might look like, then you give us a call and we'll help out. But some places identify, hey, we don't have something in place right now, but we're looking into it and planning on starting next year in February or April, as soon as spring comes around. And so effort, you may not get credit for it if you don't have it in place, but the effort is noted. And yeah, I mean, it's worth it all the way around. There's no question about it. But explore the application process regardless of whether you actually submit or not, and maybe put your deficiencies as strategic planning elements moving forward, and plan on applying 2 years from now or a year and a half from now or something like that, and start those communication pathways where you can help other efforts and help take credit for them.
Okay.
I'll just add that I think the worst thing that's going to happen if you apply and don't get it is you're going to get some feedback on what would strengthen your application. And so you're going to get some guidance on steps you should take or things that you might want to improve on. So that's, it's not like you have a 3-year period in which you can't apply again. You can apply, again, that you're going to get some recommendations on how to strengthen.
Mm-hmm. Great. And one of the things I think GFA might be considering right now is resources for the folks who have already been designated. So maybe you don't just get your designation, ideally right now even, you don't just get your designation and you're done, right? Renewals come up, and we want this to be a continuous improvement process. So one of the ways that GFA might be able to facilitate that in the future is having sort of events, training events, similar to this, but maybe only for the ones who've been designated. And so we knew that stormwater master planning was always our weak area, and we're looking forward to joining this cohort, if you will, of designees and getting tidbits from other designees about how we can do better in stormwater master planning, right? So that's all of that stuff is on the table, and you may see more about it later. So we appreciate these questions, right, to see what folks are struggling with.
Hey,
and then
Stacy,
yes.
Can I, to speak to that previous question just really quick, I do know in the past, when folks have submitted their applications, and if there's certain areas that the panel or the reviewers feel like they need more information or need, more work on, we can get them in touch with other WaterFirst designated communities that were very high in those areas to get some guidance on how they can better, get stronger in that area. So there is that out there. So definitely don't let that keep you from applying, because we want you to be WaterFirst designated. I mean, we want everybody. That's our goal, everybody in the state. So we're here to help. But I just wanted to interject that if you are weak in some areas, we are here to assist with that.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Amanda. And like I said, there were GFA staff sort of in the background here and would chime in if a question was very specific. So thanks, Amanda, for being an illustration of that. So I think we will wrap up the panel discussion now. Here we are almost out of time. And really thank you very much, Lee, Michael, Kathleen, for your time and attention to putting some thought into this panel and serving today. We really appreciate it. And the insight that you all have is unique and invaluable. So thanks so much for doing this today. So we'll move to the next slide now as we wrap up. Again, if you have missed some of the webinars or want to listen to them again or share them with your colleagues, if you go to that gfa.georgia.gov/WaterFirst webpage on the GFA's website, you will find recordings of all of these. 3 of them are already up. 1 is coming soon from today's. Next slide. Plug again to take 1 moment to fill out this evaluation survey. As you can pick up from today's webinar, there are things that we're pulling from past surveys, feedback that we're playing with and trying to figure out how the program at GFA might address that, right? Or even GFA more broadly than just WaterFirst. So again, do take a moment to give that feedback. And on the next slide, we're providing here the best way to get in touch with the folks at GFA that works on WaterFirst. So you know GFA runs different programs. For instance, they have energy programs. When it comes to topics related to WaterFirst, if you would send an email to this waterresources@gfa.ga.gov address, it will get to the right person, and they'll get back to you. So with that, please do take the evaluation that's going to pop up here as we close off. Thanks again for being a great audience and your participation today, and for asking some really good questions. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.